This project started from the voices of advocates. I mean, this was not something that, we just came up with, oh, I wonder if this could work. I mean, this is years and years from the moment the first shelter opened, and it was like, how do we, for lack of a better word, manage kind of chaos sometimes, and looking at, different people's needs and their wants and their goals and that kind of thing, but how do you kind of manage that in this environment, and people coming in with so many different barriers, and the whole one size fits all, we knew that probably wasn't working, but you had to start somewhere type of thing. So I'm kind of wondering, just as you went through the process, or maybe even before, some of the challenges, some of the things that it's like, boy, I wish I could change that, but I'm not exactly sure how or why, kind of thing, this isn't working, but kind of some of just the common challenges, I think, that what we heard from a lot of shelters. If talk about that a little bit, but really, and it comes from that place of the voices of advocates being able to say, I think there's a better way, and it really was them looking at, that low barrier rules and the voluntary service kind of thing when we do our work, but kind of just some common challenges that just come up anyway, before this ever started.
I remember, being that new advocate, and you come into it, to the work, and you are there to fully embrace these principles of empowerment and self-determination, and then all of a sudden you are working in a shelter, and your main job is to enforce rules, is to run women up for not doing a chore, and to punish them for breaking these arbitrary rules that are made up. They're not reality-based, they're not real world rules. And the consequence of that is that we would have to kick them out of shelter. And there was such this dissonance, this conflict of what brought us to this work and what we thought we were a part of, and then the role and how we were organized to do our work. And it was wrong.
Yeah, and I always struggle with, so domestic violence is against the law. And so the reason that someone comes and stays with us is because they've been a victim of a crime. And so to turn around and be punitive to someone who's been a victim of a crime never made sense to me either. And then, to borrow that same word, crime, I was also raised in an environment that's let the punishment fit the crime. If you don't do your dishes, and now you don't have a safe place to stay, and potentially you're returning to an abusive environment because there was a dish in your seat, it never made sense to me. I don't understand why we thought that was a good idea.
Right. We didn't have the words back then to call it trauma-informed.
Right.
But we knew intuitively that if we wanted to be able to create trust, that trusting relationship, if we wanted to create a place that felt safe for people, that how would we possibly be able to do that, to have that healing relationship for survivors if we were in this role of rule enforcer?
When I think back to when I first started in the movement, I had a son who was 13, 14 years old, and we had a rule that we didn't take boys over the age of 12. And so the thought of, here's this family who's sometimes fleeing for their lives, and we're going to say you have to leave this child, or you have to be separated from your kids in this very traumatic moment. It felt wrong to me from the beginning.
And I know, those rules, they were not put in place because people had intention of wanting to control.
Right.
And I think that's, maybe where, when we got started on this, that people may have felt like it was blaming,
Right.
like advocate blaming,
Sure.
and we were doing this work. And to know, and I think that we all recognize that those rules were put in place for safety.
Right.
Because people were concerned.
Yep.
But it was taken too far.
Yeah.
Well, we hide behind them.
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
a lot
it's
of ways
easier.
in the beginning days, like you
It's
say,
easier.
as advocate, it was easy to hide behind a rule, and you didn't have to have the conversation.
Right.
And sometimes conversations are hard to have.
Yeah.
And so if you could just walk up to someone and say, well, there's a rule against that, so you can't do it, end of story. And I don't like that. I like the survivor-defined advocacy. I like the trauma-informed care of, I have to get to know every single person, and what works for you isn't going to work for you, and that's okay. We don't have to have this uniform policy, rule, tell people how they need to behave.
Yeah.
It feels so much better.